What is happening in Samoa is the careful destruction of a people and a promised nation, and around this destruction there are small words and evasive silence. Democracy is about decision-making. It has little to do with election campaigns. Its promise is that political decisions be made after consultation with the people. This is dependent upon the people being informed about the issues in question and upon the decision-makers having the capacity and will to listen and taking account of what they hear and reply. Every form of protest against the tyranny of propaganda and misinformation is proper. Those who have planned Samoa's destruction are cold, calculating and heartless. They are foreigners who believe in nothing but greed. They believe in nothing but themselves. Witness the Human Rights Protection Party's refusal to vote to protect the rights of Samoan people when our Constitution commands them to protect all rights and fundamental rights. They refuse to believe in any scale of priorities beyond the pursuit of profit. They seek to replace the joy of our Samoa with control. Throughout the world, extensive areas which were once rural places are being turned into economic zones. The initial dismembering always comes from elsewhere and from corporate interests pursuing their appetite for ever more accumulation, which means seizing natural resources regardless of to whom the land or water belongs. The Land Titles Registration Act 2008 and the Water Resources Management Bill 2008, which became an act, are on point. The exploitation soon demands airports, military and paramilitary bases to defend what is being siphoned off in collaboration with the local criminal underworld. Look at the Police Powers Act 2007 in Samoa, visiting specialists, A2, above the law, with a license to kill and immunity from prosecution. Tribal, war, famine and genocide may follow. Read John Burge's book Hold Everything Dear, Dispatches on Survival and Resistance, about globalization. Ask your government friends why they've deserted our people. Are you amazed, like me, that I keep asking government or their HRPP supporters to comment on serious issues, and all they do is remain silent? Is that what Samoan education is all about under the HRPP? I say to Samoans worldwide, look, this has been done before in other countries, in other times. Globalizers have destroyed traditional cultures through dishonest legislation, manipulation and corruption. They take what is not theirs. They deny God, they steal in the dead of night and ally themselves with the underworld. Their values all relate to money. Being a politician is not about being as greedy as you possibly can be. It's meant to be about serving and protecting the people. You politicians will forever be remembered as the ones who sold out Samoa to foreigners. It must be the first step of any following government to disclose the state of the nation's finances and the money and assets of all politicians. I keep saying to the nation that the Human Rights Protection Party continue every day to wallow in the money of the people. As Starhawk says, dialogue is meaningless without accountability. It becomes simply an exercise in public relations, making the institutions in question look sensitive, while the violence of their policies continues unabated. This is from Webs of Power, Notes from the Global Uprising 2002, Transcendental Best Books Manufacturers. I say, accept no government unless it will feed all of its citizens. Professor Philip Bobbitt writes in Terror and Consent, The Wars for the 21st Century, 2008, a Borzoi book published by Alfred A. Knopf. A state that turns on its own citizens is a state of terror, no matter what its cultural evolution. Look to page 230. A state of terror must prevent individual self-assurance from spreading within a society, for once people refuse to be cowed, it will be difficult to return them to submission. Look to page 199. The war aim of the state of terror is to bring about an environment of terror within which consensual choices, the selection of representatives and policies in a democracy, the operations of the market, the exercise of religious freedom and other human rights, especially the rights of women, but also the rights of the vulnerable racial, religious and ethnic groups cannot be maintained. Look at page 205. Legitimacy in governance is a constitutional matter. The reverse is also true. Constitutional governing is a matter of maintaining legitimacy. In the US courts, they affirm the legitimacy of government operations by insisting that they conform to the provisions of the American Constitution. No act by government is lawful unless it comports with the letter and the spirit of the Constitution. Look at page 242. All who are committed to government by consent do in fact share the belief that respect for the rule of law is the indispensable element in legitimate governance, because protecting our rights is the purpose that empowers government in the first place. Look at page 285. A state of consent is one in which all persons can exercise the rights of conscience, and in the politics of which the individual conscience plays the decisive role by means of a consensual system of laws. Look at page 523. Both Machiavelli and Walser observed that there are two different moral codes, one for the civilian and one for the government official. Look at page 368. Juan Ferrero wrote in the New York Times on June 24, 2004, in an article, Latin American Graft and Poverty, Trying Patience with Democracy. Class disparities and poverty levels have become so bad in Latin America that leaders are being ousted in violent protests. Politicians are being lynched by angry mobs, and many people would rather have an honest tyranny than a democracy that serves as cover for plundering the people's resources. William T. Vollman, at page 297 of his book, Rising Up and Rising Down, Some Thoughts on Violence, Freedom and Urgent Means, published by Gerald Duckworth Co. Limited, states that an indication of unlawful authority is when the authority can change the social contract at will itself, for example, constitutional laws. Here we see with the Human Rights Protection Party how it has bypassed the Constitution to place the Land Titles Registration Act on Samoa's law books, even though it has not filled the legal requirements to become a law. His description of unlawful authority includes when the officials are not assistants of the people but become a ruling class. This has certainly happened in Samoa, with the disappearance of aid money, with the fact that the infrastructure never seems to improve, education never improves. There is a lot of theatre that takes place in terms of what is going to be done in the press, what has been given, but very little result. The government performs its tasks by force, not affection. We have a bullying government in Samoa, and a sour-faced, bad attitude from the leaders. When the state does not enrich its citizens but makes them poorer, Samoan citizens are getting poorer and poorer. The leaders, the political leaders, are becoming richer and richer. We see that with some government organisations there are 7 or 8 executive members, assistant CEOs who sit round in an office, have a car, are paid 80,000 plus tala per year and do nothing. This is a state that does not enhance liberties, but it restricts them. The Police Powers Act 2007 permits surveillance if you're suspected of committing a crime with a penalty for more than 1 year. So the most effective surveillance equipment, both optical, that is cameras, and audio, is used to spy on government enemies, to spy on people. Suspicion is all that is required. However, the surveillance of the government itself for revenue gathering activities, when they're corrupt, is completely forbidden and is not admissible in a court of law. Do our people feel threatened and not safer under the government? Yes. You can't get a job, you won't keep a job, and you'll be an outcast if you don't agree with their social statements. Take, for example, the village mayors. They're meant to represent the village, but now that we learn that the government is paying them, is telling them that they have to stand with the government against their own people. They are looking for total control. The people cannot peacefully revoke the social contract. For example, using force or money to gain power and retain it. This is what they do. They use money corruptly obtained in order to bribe at election time They place all of their own officials in positions as gatekeepers, for example, in charge of electoral reforms, in charge of voting. They run that committee in each village so that you will not even be permitted to run as a candidate in Samoa unless you're supported by the HRPP, because they pay the chiefs who decide that you deserve a certificate which is required for you to run as a member of parliament, that you have served your village. In other words, if you don't serve the HRPP, if you don't promise to be a part of the HRP or to be their slave, you will never get anywhere near parliament. Now, Vollman says that a nation of people can rise up when the authority sets itself up in permanent power, when it will not discuss or debate serious issues affecting the welfare of the nation, and when it has no sympathy for the people, when it aims at permanently damaging the rights of those governed, when the authority offers no release from obedience if people disagree with it, when the majority are victimised by a government minority, when it seizes greater power in bursts of speed to permanently deprive the majority of fundamental rights and freedoms, when authority is not lawful in the first place, for example, bribery or corruption at election time.